Welcome to Exhibitor Lounge, sponsored by ExhibitEdge.com. I'm your host and your trade show mixologist, Michael Gray. Here each week you receive simple, practical, and proven tips to improve your trade show marketing strategy, maximize your budget, and get better results. All right, today's topic is the straight bill of lading. And you may go, straight? What do you mean straight bill of lading? Everybody just refers to it as the bill of lading or B of L. Well, there's actually quite a difference between a straight bill of lading and a bill of lading. Now, a bill of lading in general is negotiable. It can have pricing information, it can have lots of information on the document. It is what the carrier fills out and uses to ship your freight, but also bill freight and so on. A straight bill of lading is what is used on a trade show floor, and that is non-negotiable, and all it is, it's for transfer of title of your property from the general contractor to a shipping agent that you designate on a bill of lading. I want to go over a little bit about what a straight bill of lading is and what it contains. Now, it's always going to contain the shipment origin, it'll contain the shipment destination, and it'll contain the carrier's name that you need to put in, okay? Now, it also contains a block to prepay or for collect shipments. Now, prepay, I always love the term because prepay just means bill to. The carrier will bill you after the shipment is delivered, okay? Or collect. And then there's going to be a place for a name and address in order to take care of those arrangements. Now, that's not pricing and that's not anything else. It just tells the carrier that the general contractor is not liable for the cost of this shipment, okay? The other things on a bill of lading are the number of pieces and the description block of the shipment. And it's very important to get as detailed as you can in this section, okay? The general contractor will also have a reassignment block, and it's the one that says, you know, send back to warehouse or ship via general contractor's carrier, okay? And there's some techniques in here. I always like to put deliver back to warehouse because I can hold the transportation company, if they don't show up, more accountable. And they just go to the warehouse and they pay the small fee or surcharge, which is usually about, I've seen it around $15 per hundredweight, for the general contractor to take it off the floor and take it back to his local warehouse. So that's just a strategy that can be used, but you do have to check one of those two boxes. Now, the method of freight, which is something people don't check a lot, but that's very important. I mean, on this bill of lading, it talks about motor freight, air freight, van line, or other, especially if it's a POV or privately owned vehicle. You're going to want to specify the carrier method, and most importantly, you're going to want to specify the date you need it delivered by. If you're doing two-day air or if you're doing motor freight, but, you know, I mean, not motor freight, but van line freight, and you want to make sure that it gets to you by a certain date, you must put that date on there. Now you say, well, my carrier knows the date. Well, if the freight is forced off the floor, then the general contractor needs to be able to tell his carrier that it needs to get back by a certain date. So, I mean, you have to be a little detailed on these things to make sure it's okay. Now, I'm going to talk about forced freight a little bit. I mean, the general contractor, he's got to get the freight off the floor. And if your carrier doesn't show, oh, that's another important point I want to bring up. Please be very general when it comes to listing your carrier's name. If you work with a specific United Van Line agency, don't list the agency you work with. You know how they have different names for each agency? Just say United Van Lines. One that just happened recently is United Van Lines and Mayflower are two carriers that have merged together. And so if you write United Van Lines on it and a Mayflower truck shows up and the general contractor gets picky about it, he could say, well, this was specified for a United truck and you're a Mayflower truck, so we're not going to give it to you. So learn a little bit of the names of carriers and be more general in your term so that, I mean, the general contractor has a responsibility to follow the paperwork and do this correctly. Now, the one other thing I'm going to tell you, I'll say for next week, it's going to be the National Motor Freight Classification of Freight. Now, I'll tell you right away that exhibit class is usually at class 125, but I've never really understood that. I've always said class 92, which is computers or monitors, class 110, which makes more sense than 125, which is cabinets. But also if you have like literature or books or something you're shipping on a nice pallet, that should be like class 65 or 50. Now, the lower the number, the cheaper the rate. And so when you're negotiating pricing with a carrier, think about the different national motor freight classifications. Otherwise, they'll just lump it all as class 125 or maybe exception class 100 for your freight. A little confusing, I know, but just look up NMFC classifications, and it'll explain the 18 different classes that they put motor freight in order to adjust pricing or to price things accordingly. It also helps enforce freight. If you say, hey, how did you classify my freight? Because they may have classified it high in order to charge a higher price. All right, the next thing I want you to look at real quick is the shipping label. If you put a shipping label on every piece, it's so easy to add that. And all you're doing is saying, this is the total number of pieces in my shipment, and this is number 2 of those 8. And so it helps the people on the show floor when they're taking your freight or locating your freight, if you just add that simple piece of information to your shipments. Well, anyways, as always, please respond with your questions or comments and let everybody know about exhibitorlounge.com. We'll see you next week. Until then, I'm your host, Michael Gray, telling you, relax in the Exhibitor Lounge.